So today I wanted to explore the idea that um, stupidity is a kind of asset uh, that can really improve someone's life in a lot of ways, um, assuming you don't care about having the most accurate view of the world, but instead a psychologically healthy one. Um, there's a concept called depressive realism, which tends to mean that people who are depressed or prone to it, um, or at least have negatively balanced viewpoints, they tend to have more accurate views of what is true or untrue than people who are happier. Um, this kind of goes back to what I was talking about before in my other videos with how um, happiness and uh, depression or anxiety are on a continuum, and neither one of them are really like your brain malfunctioning per se. It's more just how you process information and what you focus on. So, uh, with people who are dumb, um, and dumb here, I wouldn't be using like as a pejorative. I would just be using it as a descriptive statement in that they are essentially nearsighted. They just don't see things that are beyond their paradigm, and they don't tend to know that you can even get outside of that paradigm. Um, so maybe dumb isn't the best word here, but a good example of that would be um, just to show you what I'm trying to reference. Uh, you have the concept of honor um, that is very pervasive throughout the military world, especially in Japan. Uh, Certainly historically, I don't know if it's still as relevant now, but you would have thousands and thousands of people going off into war, um, dying, uh, killing the enemy, being staked out for months, etc., in these really terrible conditions. And if you died, it was considered an honorable death. Or if you dueled one person instead of teaming up on him, or if you um, attacked him while he was looking at you instead of stabbing him in the back, um, that kind of thing, it was considered more honorable. Now, to many people, that is a kind of orthodoxy. That is a paradigm that they're in where they see that as a kind of axiom. That's like their baseline belief is that is a true statement. It just is honorable. Now, of course, that belief doesn't stand up to scrutiny because you could immediately question how arbitrary it is. If your purpose was to win the war, why would you be honor dueling at all? Why wouldn't you just go after the soldiers in their sleep? If your purpose was to win the war, then it would make sense to honestly not start it in the first place because you would might be able to do the same thing through diplomatic means. Was the war a just war? Probably not. That's debatable. Because most wars are just a carnival of violence and really not good for humanity, I would argue, in general. So the point being is that is not a just foolproof viewpoint that is immune to criticism or immune to other ways of looking at it. But to a stupid person, these things are irrelevant. They don't matter to them. They can just kind of swerve out of the way and continue believing with absolute certainty. And that's another big point is the certainty levels of dumb people is much too high um, for being accurate. But again, they have this certainty and they have this kind of cavalierness towards uh, information that is countervailing their own viewpoint that it gives them a psychological boon this whole time because they're certain that this is true. So if their cousin died in a war, then to them, they're not going to even consider the fact that it was a pointless death that didn't need to happen because it was an honorable death. This is a good thing. Now, obviously, they'll be sad about this, but the ability, my point being, the ability to frame it in such a way that is kind of perpetually positive, despite a lot of evidence to the contrary, is a skill um, on the dumb person's part, an unintentional skill that is extremely useful to have. In the same way that it is very likely not true that when you die, you uh, go to essentially some ethereal Disneyland um, with lollipops and whatever else that is considered to be in heaven. That's very likely not true. Um, but it is very helpful to think that it is true in terms of just mental life, because any issue that you have in your current life is, in some sense, irrelevant because you know that it doesn't matter if things go horribly while you're living. Your mere mortality, that is seconds in the uh, cosmic scheme of things because you'll be living infinitely in heaven. Um, so again, that's another high utility belief that is very unlikely to be true, and generally speaking, people who are kind of immune to uh, evidence and immune to antithetical viewpoints don't have the kind of psychological strife that you would suffer in figuring out that all of this is BS and that there is nothing. Um, that when you die in a war, you're dead. You didn't need to die. You were in someone else's war. And that's the long and short of it. That is a much more, albeit sobering, depressing view in comparison. So even though I would consider it the more accurate view, it would be simultaneously a depressingly valenced view. So the thing that I was thinking, and I've been grappling with this for a while, is there some kind of way to sort of automatically um, reason yourself into a kind of myopic viewpoint like the dumb person has on purpose to then avoid the uh, strife of knowing how things actually work. So to me, that's an open question. I don't know really if you can do it because it would always have the um, you would always have the background knowledge that you're kind of setting up a house of cards. Um, so it'd be difficult to say if you could do it without like frontally lobotomizing yourself, but I don't know. It's an open question for me because I know that with cognitive behavioral therapy, you're essentially refocusing on things on purpose to try and make them more positively balanced in the first place. So, like if you have an ambiguous situation, then the anxious type might hyper focus on this or that detail, and as a result, have a lot of psychological angst because they just can't stop ruminating on this or that detail, and they overvalue it as their brain just continues and continues and continues to think about that topic. Um, and because they overvalue it's not actually an accurate perception of reality. It's more like for instance, if you're really afraid of crowds, um, you'll constantly be thinking like, oh, what are they going to think, or what are they going to say if they look at me and I look weird or my shoes untied, etc. Um, now, in reality, none of that really matters that much. No one really cares that much if they even notice. But you're constantly thinking about it so much that it updates your uh, psychological priors, in that your brain thinks that this must be a high risk item because it's so focused on. So it's almost as if you're writing the book for yourself, and then your brain is reading the book, and then it's like, wait a minute, why is this listed on page 1 through 50 6,000 times? So the idea with CBT is to try and reduce the times it's listed, and then increase the times that more adaptive thoughts are listed, and then essentially change your um, mental landscape, because your mental landscape is reflective of your priors. So whatever your priors are, then that's going to reflect your mood. So if you can improve the accuracy of your priors into something that is more helpful, then your mood will improve too. So in the case of anxiety, that the fact that your priors are inaccurate because you're over focusing on irrelevant details, then once you move closer to reality, you'll be more in normative functioning. But like with depression, some of those priors are actually right, um, but you then need to purposefully move them out of that. So what I'm saying is when you have priors that are actually correct in that, like, you're noticing things that are accurate of the world, and you're noticing that they're statistically accurate. So like if, I don't know, you could say that something along the lines of like, it is just true that 100% of people die, for instance. That's an accurate belief. Is that a useful belief to ruminate on? No, because it's depressing. Um, but I think the thing that you would want to do is somehow figure out a way to focus on true beliefs that are also helpful. And this would be a much shorter list than what the dumb person is working with, because they're working with these ideas and preconceptions of uh, honor culture or other ideas that are not very true at all, but they're useful. Whereas if you wanted to be a realistic person, you would have to go with what's true and useful, and then start to excavate your mental landscape uh, away from what is true but not helpful to think about, which are many, many things. Um, so I don't know. I'd have to think about it more if there really is a way to force oneself to rewire their thinking into being less um, to ruminate less, which is what a dumb person does. They don't really seem to ruminate at all, or if they do ruminate, they seem to have it be so simplistic that again it it would immediately fall apart under scrutiny. But the the level of certainty that they have about these things is so high. Um, I'm not sure. As you can tell, I struggle to empathize with how that even works. But yeah, it's just been a thing that I've been thinking about for quite a while. Of how do they do it, essentially? How do you create a working model of the utility of being an idiot while remaining true and accurate to yourself?